Longtime KTVU reporter Rob Roth witnessed that incredible level of professionalism from Dennis. He joins us now. You've been retired for a few years, Rob, but what sort of impact did Dennis have on you?
Well, an amazing impact, Frank and Alex. When I first was hired here in 1984, Dennis was very much established in both in the newsroom and certainly in the community. And when I got hired, friends would ask me, so what's Dennis Richmond like? What's Dennis Richmond like? It's all they wanted to know. And you'd be out on a story, and as we know, disasters happen, horrible things happen, and people have just lost houses and their businesses, and they'd say, so you're from Channel 2, how's Dennis Richmond doing? They just loved him. His impact was tremendous. And in the newsroom, I mean, he was, you guys know, he was so charismatic, and he was such a presence, and a really, really, really smart newsman. I mean, he wanted to know what you knew before he went on the air.
And you saw that on stories. He wanted to sort of hear from you what information you had in your story. He was really invested in the work that you were doing.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Because maybe he had to write an intro, to a story that you were writing, and he wanted to, have as much information as he possibly could.
Yeah, ownership of every story in the 10 o'clock news. But there was a softer side to him as well, more of a playful side. You shared a story with me in the newsroom. If you could do that with us.
Yeah, Frank. So back in the day, I'm going to be dating myself, but before everything was computerized, we had paper scripts for the broadcasts. So we'd have piles of scripts. And before we'd go on at 10 o'clock, Dennis would crumple up wads of paper and throw them at you. You'd be, trying to write your last kind of lines, and he'd hit you in the head with a paper ball, and you'd look up, and then he would pretend like he didn't know what was going on. He'd be, have a pencil or be on the phone, pretend he was on the phone. He'd go, what? It wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was always him. It was always him. And that was Dennis. He could be, this serious newsman and a little kid at the same time.
That's great. He had all those sides to him. But we've talked a lot about how he really sort of guided the newsroom in many ways and guided the coverage and really set a high bar for all the other journalists in the newsroom. How did you sort of feel that? How did you, did you feel you had sort of a standard to live up to?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you wanted to be prepared mostly, but I remember, you'd be out on a live shot in a live situation, and if you hear Dennis in your ear toss it to you, your first thought is, I better not flub my first few lines. Yeah. So you really wanted to be on your game, and he just kind of upped it. And I would say, I mean, when I first met him, I mean, frankly, he was intimidating. Yeah. And he wanted to see what kind of skills you had, and if you had game, you were in, and he was great to work with. But if he didn't respect what you were doing, it was going to be a hard time here.
Do you think he helped to make you a better journalist along the way? Totally. And because he was so well known in the community that you were, people perceived, say, someone like me as a reporter, and I'm sure the other reporters as well, as part of Dennis's team. So sure. If you're okay with Dennis, then you're okay with me, and I'll talk to you.
Tough but fair. Yep. I'm curious. If you went out and did a great piece on whatever, would he come back the next day and say, "Hey, Rob, that was a good story"?
Occasionally, and he wasn't a big compliment thrower, but if you got one, that was like a gold bullion. You'd want to put in your dresser. It meant a lot. It meant a lot because he didn't throw away compliments. That's for sure.
You talk about that special connection that he had with the audience, and you talk about the fact that people come up to you and say, "Oh my gosh, you know Dennis. How's Dennis doing?" That's something we still experience to this day as members of the KTVU family, which is just remarkable. I want to get your perspective, Rob. I mean, what do you think it was about Dennis that endeared him in that way to the audience here in the Bay Area? I think he
kind of oozed integrity, and I think that was probably his superpower. He looked good. He always dressed well and was in great shape. So I think that sort of combination of kind of a matinee idol looks and just serious, this is how it is. We're not gonna lie to you. This is what's going on. I think that just resonated with our audience.
I was out in the street you know, talking to people and getting their, you know, their thoughts about Dennis and his passing, and young and old alike.
Yeah.
All I had to say was Dennis Richmond. I go, oh my God, I remember him. He had a presence, but it was lasting. I mean, you remembered him forever.
Oh, completely. I mean, years after he retired, and you know, and I was still here working, people would ask about him, and I think people grew up with him. You know, he was on the air 30-something years, you know, whatever it was, and I think, you know, if you were 10 years old and the 10 o'clock news and Dennis was on in your household, when you were 35 and 40, you were still watching him, and their kids would be,
that's it,
you know, knowing that name, and you know, as we know, and this is a very loyal audience that we have at KTVU. So
it really is, and we owe a lot of that to Dennis.
That's right.
Rob Roth, good to see you. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances, but thank you for coming to share your thoughts today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.